We are live. Welcome to Crypto Law TV. I'm John Deaton, the founder and host. Last week, huge news that got signed by the judge this week, which is the dismissal of the aiding and abetting charges against Chris Larson and Brad Garlinghouse as it relates to institutional sales. We're going to talk about that with a special guest. But my first guest needs no introduction. Let's bring him on. He's crypto's favorite attorney, Jeremy Hogan of Hogan and Hogan down in Orlando, Florida. Welcome, Jeremy.
John, how's it going? Long time no see.
Yes, I
that
know.
Was New York, right?
We did. We're going to talk about that party in a minute when I bring on someone special. But first, just give us your general thoughts before I get to my special guest on what the dismissal with prejudice meant to you.
Well, the first thing is, I think, like you, I wasn't completely shocked. I thought that was probably the smart move on the SEC's part, which, you know, by how they've acted in the litigation up to that point, I wasn't quite sure they were actually going to make that move. But I guess cooler heads prevailed, and I think the SEC made the right move. That case was really hard to prove. You know, scienter on a case where obviously it's not that simple a case, because out of the three types of XRP sales, the judge found in Ripple's behalf for two of them and found against them on one. So it's going to be a very difficult case to make that they knew that they were breaking the law when they helped Ripple sell XRP. So yeah, I wasn't shocked. I thought that was actually the smart move by the SEC. That's a tough case of trial.
You know, I agree. You know, but our audience, they've heard your perspective, they've heard mine, and I'm going to do something a bit risky here. I'm going to bring on a special guest, Jeremy, and the reason I say it's risky is because I might be violating the bro code. You know what I'm talking about? By going directly over your head and going to the real brains behind the operation at Hogan and Hogan and bringing on your beautiful, intelligent wife, Vinvu. Hi.
Oh man, you know, I might forgive you for that, John. I might not. We'll see.
Well, the one thing that I know, and I used to watch your videos, and we're going to talk about someone else who admitted to watching your guys' videos here in a bit. But the one comment I always would see when I would scroll down after your videos to the comments is that they wanted more of this lovely lady right here. And I'm sure you agree with me.
Yeah,
welcome.
well, who wouldn't?
Vinvu. I think you're on mute, hon.
This is the first time on Crypto Law. I don't think we can hear it, right?
No, I don't think so. I think hopefully
I didn't do anything. You know, you can't accuse me of cutting her cutting her off.
Okay, let's see how we
right
do
now.
Still no go. All right. I'm sure my people in the back half are going to try to figure it out. We're going to get her on. I'm sure we'll figure it out. But let me ask you.
If anything, John, I hate to say this, but she's like literally right next door to me, so she can always come over and borrow my headset if she wants to.
Okay. Well, if we don't get it fixed in the next 30 seconds, how about we do that? All right. Because
okay, perfect.
I really want to get her perspective. As you know, I text you and said, please ask your wife to come on, because I know she knows this case just as well as you and I in many ways. And I know the audience loves her. I saw how many people at the Ripple party, you know, just absolutely not only love you, but love her as well. So
yeah, she did. She's put in so much work in the last 3 years, not on the videos, but she also has kept up on the litigation and that. Now she hasn't been as involved in the last 6 months or so since we really stopped doing the videos, but she has put a lot of work, and I always wanted to make sure people understood that for the 8 hours that I would put in to make a video, she was putting in eight hours just as hard.
Right. Now, while we're trying to figure out that, let's go back to this dismissal. Let's see if we got her on first. Still not working. Everything was working pre-show. I want everybody to know this is live TV. This is what happens. And so we're going to adapt and we're going to overcome. And
you can come over here.
You're over there, and we'll continue. But when you say that the scienter, obviously you're talking about state of mind. And both you and I used to comment, if SEC enforcement lawyers, who are the experts at knowing what is or isn't a security, if they could openly trade XRP without any restriction up until 2019, how in the world could Brad Garlinghouse know in 2015, 4 years prior, as a layperson, not an expert in securities laws, that it was so obvious it was a security? Is that what you're really getting at?
That was the first thing. I mean, that's the first hurdle they would have to overcome. And then at trial, you would also bring in Bill Hinman, whose speech at a minimum just clouds the whole issue even more, because then you could have someone who listened to his speech, and you could have a Garlinghouse or a Chris that would say, well, we're decentralized as well, so obviously, we're not selling illegal securities. You've got I mean, there's just all sorts of evidence that you have the memorandums of law from the attorneys that Ripple hired. The first one said, if you do this, you're going to be selling it. So they changed up their business model, and then they had a second opinion which said, well, as long as you're doing it that way, then it's okay. So you have all sorts of problems that the SEC was going to have with this lawsuit against the individual defendants. And I think that's basically what ended up, I think, happening, is they decided, we're going to lose this, and we can't kind of, and we're going to take an L, we're going to lose, and then it's also going to drag out our appeal for 9 more months. So that was, I think, the big issue.
Right. Now, there was a little bit of debate, and I want to see where you fall on this. I was going to ask your wife as well. Some people took the position that this was not a surrender by the SEC, that this was a strategic move that the SEC did, not because they weren't confident about the case, but because they wanted to get to the appeal much faster. And I kind of, tried to reject that theory myself, but I want to get your take on that. Like, do you think that played a role or what?
I think that the SEC really had no choice in the matter. I think they had no choice but to dismiss the individual defendants and avoid the trial. So I think it's kind of a moot point what the reasoning was. I think it does help them get their appeal moving forward faster than if they had gone to trial. But at the same time, this was such a bad case that they really had no choice to dismiss it, and they had to dismiss it now, really, because in December they were going to have to start doing some real work and start getting witnesses ready, start paying witness fees and that side of thing. So, I think that might have been something that played into it, but really it doesn't matter, because I don't think they really had a choice one way or another.
All right, let's see if we got this fixed. No, we sure don't. We've tried. I know that crypto law back there is working frantically.
What?
Everything.
You want me to just bring her over here? She can come over and sit.
Yeah, if she doesn't mind.
Well, let me. I'm going to switch over to a different mic here too.
Okay, and while you're doing that, I'll just respond to what you just said. And what you just said was that you didn't think that they had a choice. And so let me make this clear to everyone out there, how strong I feel about what you just said. This has been a war, an absolute war between Ripple, these two executives, and the SEC from day one. And if the SEC was seeking $450 million for Chris Larson sales and $150 million from Brad Garlinghouse sales. So I want you to ask yourself, would the SEC say, God, we might be able to appeal this 4 or 6 months sooner after 3.5 years? Or if we really believe we can get these guys held responsible and collect $500 million from them, we're just going to let that go. I just think that's nonsense. And that if they had any shred of confidence that they could make their case, they wouldn't have let that $500 million hammer hanging over these two executives go. What you say?
I completely agree. By the way, can you hear me okay? I switched my microphone.
Yes.
We could talk. Okay. So completely agree. And the truth is that Chris and Brad were brought into this lawsuit, I think, for really one purpose. And I think Clayton even kind of suggested that this was the purpose, even though he didn't talk about the Ripple case specifically. And that was to bring leverage against Ripple. Because, for example, my law firm is Hogan and Hogan, and if you sued my law firm, okay, that's one thing. But if you could sue me and my wife as well, and we control Hogan and Hogan, that puts a lot of pressure as to what Hogan and Hogan does. Because I want to get myself out of the lawsuit, and therefore I'm going to make Hogan and Hogan settle, or at least be more apt to settle. So, with that being said, in hindsight, that's exactly what Chris and Brad were brought in for. And I don't think personally that SEC ever intended to pursue this trial against them individually. I think that they were just brought in as leverage. And that can be a legitimate litigation tactic, although ethically it's kind of in the gray zone. But that's just my thoughts. This case against Brad and Coach was never moving forward.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there is a video of Jay Clayton and Joseph Grunfest together where Jay Clayton says that he believes in suing the individual executives because it adds different leverage to the case. And that's exactly what you were talking about. And so I believe it was a bullying tactic from the beginning. Hey!
I am so sorry. I don't know what happened.
No. Listen, everyone that knows me knows that I'm a tech moron. So it's easy.
I don't know if it was me. I stayed put when the microphone was stayed put. So I'm not exactly sure what happened. I'm so sorry.
No. So listen, let me first get to before I ask you your take on the dismissal and everything that we're talking about. I got to ask you, you were at the Ripple party. What was it like as a spouse to see your husband, the amount of admiration, love, and affection that you were witnessing? How did that feel from your side?
Oh, it was overwhelming. It was really overwhelming. It was really neat to see people that we usually just interact with online. I mean, I met you even briefly. That was really nice. I got to see my rock star of a husband interact with his fan. That was really cute.
Yeah.
All his fans. But I think the most special thing is I love any opportunity where you can get different people from different backgrounds, different walks of life, come together for a common purpose. I thought it was a truly special night.
No, it was. And I'm going to share a story that I haven't shared with anyone publicly yet about that night. So I needed to go to the bathroom because I had to pee, and I was trying to make my way to the bathroom, but all the XRP holders, God bless them, they were approaching me and they wanted to take pictures and shake my hand. And the last thing you want to do is act like you don't have time for these people that are being so great and so respectful. But after an hour and a half, I really had to go, and I got a 55-year-old bladder, not a 25-year-old bladder. And so I'm sitting there thinking, God, why doesn't Brad Garlinghouse or somebody walk by and take the attention away? And then I spot you and Jeremy about 25 feet away, and I see some XRP holders coming my way, and I yell, "There's Jeremy Hogan!"
Oh, I remember that moment. Yeah.
And everybody turns and does a beeline for you guys, and I get to go to the bathroom. So anyway,
that's funny.
I know that's a little TMI, but
that's a good story.
We saved your bladder.
Yes, you did. The other thing I wanted to ask you is that I thought that as content providers, you guys were paid the ultimate compliment about your Legal Briefs YouTube channel. And that was the CEO himself, Brad Garlinghouse, got up on stage and said he watched those videos. You guys always would get plus 100,000 views. And how did it feel to know that one of the views that you were getting was the CEO who's actually in the room with the lawyers handling the case, but still wants to watch your guys' videos?
That was a surprise that he mentioned that. That was pretty neat. That was a surreal moment.
Yeah, I forgot to send our bill out to him, but it's in the mail now.
Okay, so why don't you give us, we heard Jeremy's perspective. You know this case well. You're a lawyer. You've been litigating cases just like Jeremy and myself. What was your thoughts on it? Were you surprised? And what were your general thoughts about them just voluntarily dismissing with prejudice?
Well, I thought the case against the two were weak in the first place because the SEC had to prove intent, that they knew they did something wrong. They aided and abetted Ripple in illegally selling XRP. So that's not an easy analysis, especially in light of the fact that the judge had ruled against them in 2 out of the 3 of the allegations. What I was surprised about is that they didn't get anything from the 2. I thought there was going to be, hey, you guys give us $1 million each, whatever amount, we'll let you go. I mean, they just, that way you can, they compose it as more of a settlement instead of a dismissal. So that was surprising to me. Seems like they just threw in the towel. So I'm not sure what happened there. I mean, there might be more background stuff that we don't know about, but that was surprising to me.
I think you're on point. In fact, I'll play a quick video of something that I had put out before this happened. If we could play that real quick. Next logical step, Jungle, would be they either dismiss the case against the 2 executives, and then they just move forward with the remedies section. And the other thing was what you were talking about just now, where basically I said, look, there's 1 of 2 things. They either dismiss and they just, surrender and move on, or they use the dismissal as a negotiation, which, hey, we'll dismiss this if it leads to some settlement. And it looks like it was the former. And so let me ask you first, and then I'll get to Jeremy. Ultimately, why do you think they did it?
Well, I mean, the obvious is that they just use Brad and Chris for strategic purposes. So basically to put pressure on Ripple. I think the SEC never intended to move forward with trial against them. I really don't. I mean, you have the 2 heads of the company. You sue them, it puts pressure on the company to settle. I've seen attorneys do this as a litigation strategy. I think it's pretty common. And as long as you have a legitimate factual basis, you can bring a defendant on in the litigation. But now that the case is basically over, I don't think there's any use for them. So you just let them go.
Yeah, Jeremy, let me ask you, you brought something up. You said it may be walking an ethical line. You and I are private litigants. And I just want to ask you, when you're the SEC, you're supposed to be wearing the white hat. You are the prosecutor. You're supposed to be seeking justice. I mean, you and I know that leverage happens often in private litigation. Should the SEC, if they have no desire or no real that intent to try these executives, should they be engaging like this?
So the reason why the government should be held to a higher standard in this realm is because they have unlimited resources. I mean, they're the federal government, the same as the prosecutor's office. I wouldn't say some prosecutor's office have unlimited resources, but the SEC is pretty close to unlimited resources. And in private litigation, you're generally on even footsteps. And when you're not on even terms, like for example, when we litigate against insurance companies have, almost unlimited resources as well, and we don't. There's often laws that are put in place that kind of even the playing field a little bit. And so when you have a government actor, you really have to have a higher set of standards. And I don't think anyone at the SEC, like we've spoken to former SEC attorneys, I don't think any of them disagree with that. You can't, as a government attorney, bring someone in purely for a pressure play. I don't think that's a right thing to do, even though a private attorney might do it.
Yeah, a lot of people too, and you've spoken about this. When Brad Garlinghouse got on stage, he admitted, and I thought it was cool of him. Here is a top level CEO of a fintech company, arguably one of the most important fintech companies in the world today. Obviously, I believe he's a billionaire, but he admitted that there were dark days when the United States government sues you. He described it as dark days, and I know you have some thoughts on that, right?
Yeah, the other thing you have to keep in mind, and this is another point, I didn't realize this, but when the SEC brings actions against crypto companies, we're only about a couple years into it, but generally in half of those actions, they're bringing other departments into these litigations as well. It might be FinCEN, it might be the Department of Justice, it might be others, I don't know. But that's another thing that being the SEC brings into play, is that they can pick up the phone and call the IRS, or they could call the Department of Justice and say, hey, you better look into this guy, look at our lawsuit against him. And that adds, so it's not just the SEC suing you, it's really the whole federal government all of a sudden being brought to bear against you. And no matter who you are, no matter how rich you are, only the government can throw you in jail, right? So that's not a fun place to be.
No, absolutely. Listen, what a lot of people want to know now, Tune, is what happens next? Could you walk them through basically what's the next stage?
Well, you want to answer?
About the from the lawsuit, you mean?
Yeah, like basically, in other words, are we looking at a settlement, or what are we looking at next?
I mean, it makes sense. I think we're looking at a settlement next. It's really ripe for it, actually, because there's only one issue left, right? There's only one issue left. That's the institutional sales. And basically what that means is, what does Ripple have to pay? So in the bigger picture, I don't think this is a case where let's go all the way and we're going to set precedential value. I don't think a California judge is going to look to a New York trial order for precedential value. And so if the only issue left is what does Ripple have to pay, I mean, I don't see why settlement wouldn't be in the short future.
You see, Jeremy, I agree with that, but I've been thinking that this case was ripe for settlement for a long time, but before the release of the Hinman emails, I thought that was going to be a great chance for settlement. When this decision came out, and before the dismissal, what your wife was talking about, using the dismissal of the executives as a negotiation ploy to get a higher, penalty from Ripple. But it just never seems to happen. So what's your take on settlement? Do you think it's going to happen, or do you think this is just a $770 million and we're just starting the fight? So
I'm getting up a little bit because I'm getting ready to run because I'm going to disagree with my wife. I mean, if you look at this from a private litigant standpoint, this case is teed up for settlement. I mean, if this was Corporation A versus Corporation B, this case would be settled before the end of the year, right?
Yep.
But what I realized recently in digging into some of the SEC cases, they don't operate like a typical litigant, and they just haven't in the past. And I don't know what goes on in the rooms with the meetings about what they're going to do, but they just don't seem interested in a settlement in this case for some reason, and I just don't know why. But from what I've seen in the past and what I've seen in other cases, I just don't see the SEC saying, okay, we'll take $400 million and we'll let everything go. I think the judge's ruling really has got to them for some reason, and they're not treating it like a trial level judge ruling. They're almost looking at it like it's an appellate court ruling, and I don't understand why.
Well, I'm going to try to make up for violating potentially the bro code by going over your head, bringing your wife on. I actually, what she's saying makes perfect sense, and it's rational. And I bet that if you all were representing one side and I was representing the other, we could get a settlement negotiated in half a day. However, I'm of the minority view out there as well with you, Jeremy, is that if I had to predict, I would say there hasn't been one discussion of settlement. And I know that's going to shock a lot of people out there. But even when you look at the things like the general counsel and the CEO outside of the SEC sort of poking fun, some could argue at them. I think that the SEC has a $770 million judgment, even though that's on paper and it can be reduced. And I think that they're still pissed off and that they want blood, and they're going to try to get $770 million, and we're going to see litigation, the ODL cells and all of the legitimate business expenses that should come across it. But there's others who don't. And do you think that the other litigation against Coinbase or the other cases play a role in this? This is for both.
Absolutely, because this is such a new area of law that I think the way the SEC is looking at it is that this is such a new area of law that any case that comes out, even if it's a trial level case, carries a lot of precedential value because there's just so little to choose from. You know, you've got the Telegram case, you've got the Kit case. That's about it. There's really just not much out there. And so I think they're really nervous about having this case kind of floating around out there when they're trying to kind of take control over the crypto space through litigation. I think they're really thinking this is going to hurt them. The other thing that kind of jumped out at me while you were talking, John, is remember the SEC kind of litigates by committee. In essence, they literally have a committee that meet and make like major decisions. I don't know if they had to meet. Do you know, did they have to meet in order to agree to the dismissal?
Yeah.
Had to be voted on?
They would have had to vote. That was a votable action. So that had to take a commissioner vote, and they had to get 3 out of the 5, for that.
The one thing I will say about Chair Gensler and bringing in, I forget his head of enforcement, Grenoir.
Yep.
Is that at least, unlike Clayton's, time, at least they have a plan of action, I believe. I think they have an idea of where they want to go with their enforcement. It might not be a good plan of action. It might be bad for the space, but they have a plan of action. And so I think that this case kind of threw a bit of a wrench in their plan of action. I think they think it needs to get taken care of before they move on.
Yeah, a lot of people were surprised too. That that there's one of the reasons why I loved your guys' show was because it really did serve an educational purpose to people who are not in litigation. What we know is that we see every day. We assume those things, and sometimes I think as lawyers we assume that regular people know even basics of litigation. And one example is that a lot of people were like, why would Brad and Chris or their lawyers agree to a dismissal, and why not force a trial and put Hinman on the stand? And of course, I'm thinking, well, if my client is being charged or pursued for 400 million or 150 million, and they're going to dismiss it with prejudice, it's a no-brainer, right? As a lawyer, that you say, yeah, we're not going to fight for cost or anything, just take the win. And what's your perspective on that?
Well, I mean, it'd be hard if someone comes to you and says, we want to let you out of. If anything, it gives Ripple better leverage if it does come down to talking settlement, because now they don't even have to bring Brad and Chris into the equation, right? I guess they would still need to get them dismissed from some parts of the case, but it really is a no-brainer all around from a litigation standpoint, also from a settlement standpoint. It just makes sense to get them out, especially if they're not giving up anything.
Deaton, this is going to make a chance for you to make Jeremy feel better. I see you nodding. Do you agree with that?
No, I agree. I think for like you said, there's the legal perspective with in experience when you're in the field, and then there's the practical perspective too. Just because what we should do, get justice, go all the way. We have a lot of clients say like, I want to go all the way. I want justice. I want to go all the way. Well, when you break it down, what does that mean?
Right.
That's not always practical. So I do agree with Jeremy.
Don't let her fool you, John. She's a tiger in court. Vicious. No mercy.
No, I'm sitting here thinking, honestly, you guys are very, I could tell, formidable opponents for down in Florida. And so let me ask you, what everybody's waiting for the SEC to pivot, right? And I think that's the question. Is the dismissal, does that give any insight that they're pivoting? I don't think so, but I didn't know if you thought that dismissal coupled with the Bitcoin ATF and all that stuff that's going on now, do you see the SEC pivoting and lessening their anti-crypto approach, Jeremy?
I'm gonna pass to Tim on this one.
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think these trial level defeats do anything. I think it's more on the appellate level. So I don't think so.
No, I'm with you, because I think a lot of people, the SEC, even though the Southern District of New York is obviously the more prevalent jurisdiction, financial markets in our country, right now you've got a library decision that found against them, and you've got this Ripple decision. There are 2 district court decisions, and I think that point of this isn't, the Second Circuit or an appellate court coming down and handling it. I don't think it's going to force the SEC's hand at all. Let me ask you, I'm going to put you on the spot. Jeremy, you're famous now for these percentages. How does this end? How does this, when all's said and done, how does this case end?
This case ends, and I'm calling this one for the first time ever. You heard it first on Crypto Law. This case ends at an appeal by Ripple on its blue sky defense, and the Second Circuit agrees with Ripple, and Ripple walks away with the big W across all three categories of sales.
Whoa, that is a bold prediction, and thank you for sharing that. You even got close to the camera.
51.6% chance of that happening.
What say you, young lady?
I stand by my husband, not his butt.
Outstanding. Listen, I appreciate you guys coming on so much. I gotta ask you though, we've all seen Jeremy in his garage band, and I'm assuming you weren't worried that he was going to become famous with his band. So my question is, did you ever in your world imagine that your husband was going to become one of the most famous crypto lawyers in the world?
No, not at all. It almost seemed like it happened overnight. It's one of those things, we put a video out, we were doing it for our website, and the first video, we kept on refreshing and the views kept on going up, and then people just wanted more and more of him, and I'm like, great, I'll egg you on. Let's give them more. So no, we did not expect this at all, but it's just so wonderful. It's wonderful to see, all of the connections and friends that he's made, and just learning a different area of law and being immersed into something totally different than we do on a normal daily basis. It's really neat.
You didn't know that Hogan and Hogan was going to become experts in U.S. securities laws?
Not at all.
My final question, because you brought it up, is everybody wants to know, is there ever going to be another Legal Briefs episode? We've got people out there. When I think about this, I'll be honest with you, I think, wow, Breaking Bad, Seinfeld reunion, Sons of Anarchy, and Legal Briefs. Those are my top four where I'm wanting more. Any chance of that going to happen?
The reunion stuff is never as good as the original, though, is it?
Usually
that
not.
is true.
Can you recreate the magic? I don't know. We'll see.
But like anything in life, never say never.
Never say never. Well, we'll end it there. Thank you so much. Sorry for the technical problems.
No, I apologize. Don't know what
But
happened.
look, I can say I brought the two of you literally closer today.
That is true.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right.
Everybody out there, I'll see you next week.
Okay. Thank
Thanks,
you,
John.
John.
Bye-bye.
Bye.